Happy Monday, welcome to my channel. I'm wearing a freaking Snuggie because it's super cold in my house and I'm not trying to wear anything else. Today we're going to look at a TikTok creator named @FitsStreamer. She basically watches all of the TikTok story times and then she breaks it down to summarize them so you don't have to watch the 30-part series videos. She does a really great job. I love watching them. Sometimes I really do want to watch the story itself, but they just do too much. So we're gonna watch some of her recaps.
Say that's tight. 2 years ago, her sister went missing, and I don't think anybody was ready for what was gonna happen next. So it was her sister's birthday. She was turning 21, and she decides to pull up on her sister like a big sister would, and take her out to dinner, take her out to get her hair done, all that. So she's calling her, and her sister's not responding. She's like, okay, this is weird. So she pulls up to her mom's house, who her sister lives with, and she said her sister's name was Lily, so we'll stick with that. So Ted pulls up, and her sister's crying, and her mom's not really knowing what's going on. So she figures that maybe her sister doesn't want to say what's happening in front of her mom, so she takes her to the car and she's like, hey, what's going on? Like, tell me what's happening. And her sister's just like crying and crying. She's in the backseat of the car. You can go to part 1 to see what her sister looked like in the backseat. So Titan's asking her sister Lee, like, what is going on? Like, tell me. Her sister's holding on to 2 things in her hand. Titan's like, do you need to go see a doctor? And her sister's not really responding. She's just like making noises. She's like, are you hurt? Like, do you need to go see a doctor? And she's like, I'm bleeding. At this point, the only thing Titan can really think about is she pregnant? Did she have a miscarriage? Like, what's going on, And so she looks at her hands and she's holding on, gripping a bloody pair of underwear and some sage. And she's like, what in the world is going on? She's like, do you need to go to the hospital? She's like, no, and I'm not pregnant, right? So her sister gives her like a little, big sister talk. She tells her everything's gonna be fine, just trust God. And she basically tells her, like, go back into mom's house, change, get cleaned up. I'm gonna take you to the Dominicans to get your hair blown out, and then we're gonna go to dinner. She's in the car, she's waiting, and she calls her mom and she's like, hey, it's been hours, like, where's Lee? And her mom tells her, like, oh, Lee left, she's not here anymore. So she walks back inside of her mom's house, and Lee left her phone, she left things all over the place. And so they're like, where could she have gone? She's missing, right? So they go looking for her at like local hospitals, favorite spots that she hangs out. Now Tyke tells us that her sister has a history of mental health issues, and also in general the family doesn't know a lot about what Lee does. She's very secretive, she doesn't share much about her life, so they didn't really know why back then, but now obviously they're very aware of what happened. And so when she left the phone behind, they're like, let's just go through her phone, contact her friends, and see if they know anything. So they go through her phone and they find this guy that she's been talking to. So they message him and they're like, hey, have you seen where my sister is gone? And he's like, no, I haven't seen her about 3 days. Mind you, this guy's like in his 30s and her sister just turned 21. So already red flags are going off. So now it's the next day. Ted calls her mom and she's like, did Lee come back? And she's like, no, she hasn't come back. I don't know what's going on. So they end up deciding to call the police. They call the police and the police are like, hey, it hasn't been 24 hours yet. We can't put a missing report in for you. So Ted said that
I hate when they say that. That's not accurate. But I believed it for a very long time because that's how they would always say it in like the true crime documentaries and stuff. That's just something they say. It used to be a rule, but it hasn't been in a long time.
she got her detective hat on and she goes into her sister's room and she starts trying to figure out if there's any clues that her sister might have left behind. The room is a mess. You can tell that she was clearly in some sort of state of depression. It had a stench of like piss, as if she was like maybe pissing in cups and leaving it there. And her notebooks were all over the place with her passwords, her secrets in there, just all types of stuff, right? And then there was also clothes packed up as if she was going to run away. So they're piecing together that maybe something actually is wrong. So at this point, the family decides the best thing to do is to go ahead and call around mental hospitals and see if she checked herself in. They start calling around, but nobody's really giving them any information. Her mom ends up finding out that she's at Einstein Hospital. So her sister gets in the car, drives down to Einstein Hospital, and she's trying to get information. They're not trying to tell her anything. So she ends up deciding just to wait around and see maybe she'll see her walking in, walking out, something, right? No luck. So at this point, she's just like, okay, let me go through this phone. Something inside of her was like, go through your sister's phone again. So she goes through the phone, but this time she goes to that app called Telegram. If you don't know what that is, it's just like another messenger app. She opens up the app, she starts looking through it. Immediately, her jaw's on the floor. She is like, what am I looking at? So at this point, Ty kind of backtracks in the story and she says that all of this happened in February. But back in January, she needed her sister to babysit her daughter for her so she can go out and have a night out with her baby daddy for his birthday. She wanted to do something nice for him. And so at that time, she trusts her sister. She would never think she would do something to hurt her or her family. So fast forward, she's at the hospital. She's going through her sister's phone and she's confused. She's like, why am I looking at child core? Why is this in my sister's phone, right? She's finding disgusting messages, videos, pictures that she can't even imagine are on her sister's phone. And she's so just like shell-shocked at this point. So she finally sees a message and it says something along the lines of, oh, she has cameras down here. I'm gonna have to take her upstairs. Immediately, Tyke's like, take who upstairs? So she decides to scroll back to January 26th, the day that her baby sister watched her daughter for her. So then she sees a message and she says something along the lines again of, I'm gonna have to take her upstairs. I'm gonna do her so dirty that I'm gonna send her to you. And then, I have a niece and I have a nephew and we'll get them and we'll make them do stuff together while we do stuff and then we'll switch out and swap them out and we'll do stuff with them. Like, absolutely.
Oh no. Out of everything that I had in my head of what that could possibly turn out to be, it was not this. This is vile.
Vile, disgusting messages. She said at this point all she could do was drop down to her knees and scream, and she's just like, I can't believe this is what's happening, right? She said God told her to keep scrolling, and so she keeps scrolling in the messages. She keeps going and she finally sees a message that is a video that her sister sent and unsent. The man is replying back saying something like, oh, I want more. She said she couldn't even remember what the message was, but she was absolutely disgusted. She tells her baby daddy what's going on. He immediately calls the cops and she's like, this is what you need to do. When you find out someone in your family member is preying on children, you need to call the police. Tite said she felt so betrayed and so just absolutely in disbelief that her sister would do something to her and her family to hurt her child, who was 1 year old at the time. At this point, she is zoned out. She is numb. She is She's shell-shocked. She just does not understand what's going on. While she's waiting for the cops, she calls her mother, who, mind you, she's not even that close with. She's like, your child is a pedo, your child is a pedo. Her mother raced over to her. Within 5 minutes, she was at Ty's side, and she was just holding her and consoling her and just crying, saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. At this point, Ty is just sitting there thinking, like, I don't remember the last time I felt my mother's hug. While Ty is waiting for the cops, she kind of snaps out of zoning out, and she gets her pew-pew. She gets in her car. She's thinking, I'm going to drive over to my mother's house, and I'm going to take matters into my own hands. The minute she hits reverse and starts getting out of her driveway, guess who pulls in? The cops. She's thinking, thank God, had they not shown up, God knows what I would have done. So the cops show up. She immediately shows them all the screenshots she took of her sister's phone, and it's just like, I can't even explain to you what she did. Just look, just look. So they tell her, like, I know you're really upset right now. Just calm down. We take this very seriously. Come with us to the station. We need to gather information. So they take her down to the station, and she's sitting there for hours. And now she's sleepy. She's cold. She's completely out of it. And all she can think is, like, if it was up to me, I would have been got this girl already. After waiting hours, Ty is like, what are you guys going to do? Like, she's going to get away. She's going to run away. Why aren't you arresting her? Like, go get her, right? And they're trying to explain to her, like, we need a warrant. We need to gather information. We can't just go into Telegram. At this point, she's just at the police station, sitting in between anger and just betrayal and just wanting vengeance. So come to find out, her sister Lee actually checked herself into a mental hospital. So when they find out that's where she's at, they're like, okay, perfect. So the cops basically tell the family, hey, don't let her know that you guys know what she did. Let her think that she's in there on a 302. We don't want her to run away. We don't want that to happen. So just don't say anything. So they're trying to act like everything is normal. Lee is in there calling her family, asking for this, asking for that, asking for things to be dropped off from the house. And the whole family knows. The whole family has been made aware. Finally, the cops get the warrant. They get all the information they need. Mind you, this case took so long, over 2 years to finally be prosecuted. When she's finally out of the mental hospital, they arrest her, they take her downtown, and she sits in jail for the next 2 years. And after a very long process, on her way home from vacation one day, the FBI messages Ty and tells her, hey, your sister's going to be sentenced to 40 years in prison. She won't be out until she's 60 years old. At this point, there was a sense of relief that she felt, but I think she was also feeling a little guilty, like, damn, like, my sister's going to be in jail for the next 40 years. But she's like, I didn't send you there. I didn't tell you.
To each their own, but there's no way I would feel even an ounce of guilt. Like, after she's did that to your 1-year-old and had plans to do that to other kids in your family, like, no, immediately no. 40 years isn't even enough, but it is more than you usually get in cases like that. Like, people, like, lawyers for these type of people find a way to get them off based on some technicality or something. You almost never hear of people spending almost all their life for child corn.
You go and essay my daughter that was 1 year old. She ends up getting a phone call from her sister, and in the most coldest, driest tone ever, her sister says, I'm sorry for what I did. Ty is sitting there like, where's the tears? Where's the remorse? It didn't feel like a genuine apology, and she was thinking, honestly, the social worker was probably standing there while her sister was saying that, and she feels like, you know, the amount of time she got was justified, and she's moving on with her life. I really hope that she's creating a village and doing everything she can to make sure that baby, you know, is able to survive this trauma and move on, and also for herself too. Like, that's such a traumatic thing to go through, to have someone that you love, your own blood, violate you, your family. It's so unfortunate that there's people like that out there, but I'm sending you so much love. You guys tagged me in this a bunch. I wanted to make sure I got it out to you guys. Make sure you guys show her so much love. I appreciate you guys as always. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.
That's really crazy. I saw that story on my timeline, and I even saved it because it was only 2 parts, and I was like, oh, okay, that's a quick little story time that I can get through. I don't have to get through 30-part like story times. But I had to let it go because the girl telling the story is like smacking hard on her gum while telling the story, and I just couldn't do it. Rage welled up inside me. So I had to watch this girl do basically the summary of it, which, I mean, not really, it's not a summary. She does tell the entire story. It's just she condenses it in one video, and she just tells it really, really well. But that's crazy. Out of everything I could have thought, like, oh, this is going this way, like the underwear, she had bloody underwear in one hand and sage in the other. Like, what was the reason? I'm still confused on that.
I watched that 5-part story, so you don't have to. That's Jordan, and she's telling us the story of her evil stepmother. Now, she named her stepmother Miss Tina. She said that her father had been married about 3 times since she was a child. The first wife was the mother of her little sister. The second wife was this woman named Wendy, who she adored. She had a long-standing relationship with her. Wendy raised her from the age of 6 when her mother passed away, all the way until she was 14 years old when her father and Wendy got a divorce. When Miss Tina entered the picture, Wendy and her father's relationship was just ending. And so when, Jordan was asking her father, like, hey, like, when did you meet Miss Tina? Like, how long have you guys been dating? All these questions. He's like, oh, about a year. And Jordan's looking at him like, a year ago, you were, still married to Miss Wendy, so how's that possible? So just off of that little bit of information, Jordan was really looking forward to this new addition to the family. So Jordan's having a birthday party, and her friend, like, smashes some cake into her face, which isn't abnormal. It's something that kids do, teenagers do. And Miss Tina was basically trying to make little comments saying, like, oh, you must have, like, really bad friends. Like, people don't do that to others. Jordan said that once Miss Tina entered their lives, she kind of started losing a lot of her friendships. They started becoming very distant relationships, and she just started to isolate Jordan from her friends, from her family members, from her mother's side. She just made it harder and harder for Jordan to maintain these relationships. Jordan was prompted to share the story time because she was recently at a cousin's wedding in November, and she took her boyfriend there, and that's when her father met her boyfriend for the first time. So the father leans over and he's like, aren't you gonna say hi to your stepmom, my wife? And she looked at him like, no, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, we're still doing this? And Jordan looked at him and she was like, yes, this is forever. I have nothing to say to that woman for the rest of my life. So then the father's like, maybe we should sit down, we should talk about this, like this is something that we both need to, you know, maybe work through. And so she's thinking like, oh, maybe he doesn't like to this day understand. So she ends up calling a best friend and being like, am I tripping? Like, was he not aware of what I went through as a child? And the best friend who was, you know, around during this time told her like, no, your father knew exactly what was going on and he was complicit. Her father was raising her full time at this point, and her other siblings were kind of spread across other family members. Her older sister was living with like an aunt. Her younger sister was living with her own biological mother. When her father divorced one day, he ended up, you know, getting together with Miss Tina. So Miss Tina started visiting. The first time she ever met Miss Tina was when she was 15 years old, right? Jordan used to have her own sense of style. Her father would never tell her what to wear or what not to wear. He would only say if things were like a little too short or anything like that. So he picked her up one day and he's taking her to the airport to pick up Miss Tina. And he looks at her and he's like, take that belt off. The belt that he bought for her. And she's like, you've never told me to take something off. So after Jordan got to know Miss Tina a little bit, she basically told her dad like, hey, I'm happy for you, do your thing, but I don't want anything to do with this relationship. Keep me out of it kind of thing. At this point, she had a very close relationship with her father. She felt like she could have these heart-to-hearts with him. She didn't think that, you know, backlash would ever come from something like this. So she used to have like this little sign in front of her bedroom door that said like nice people only. And so Miss Tina one day looks at that sign and she opens up her door, she walks into the room and she's like, oh, nice people only, huh? Well, I'm gonna come in anyway. And then she proceeds to basically tell Jordan, I'm here to stay. I'm not going anywhere. You're a child. You're not allowed to have opinions about me and my situation with your father, nothing like that. And Jordan's looking at her like, okay, cool. Jordan's like, whatever, I guess she's here to stay. So when she's looking through the office one day, she ends up seeing like printouts about like engagement rings. And so she ends up like starting to pass notes at school with her friends, being like, oh my God, this woman's gonna be in my life forever. And she's a gold digger. Now she says like, I obviously was a child, I don't know what this woman's financial status was, but at the end of the day, like that's what it was giving for her. And so I guess this note magically fell out of Jordan's backpack one day and Miss Tina finds it. At that point, Jordan was like, I'm not writing anything about this. I'm just gonna, you know, talk my piece, but not around you or in any way that you can find out that I was talking about you. Her father announces that Miss Tina and him are gonna be getting married in December of that year. And he asked Jordan to come out to Ohio and, you know, be a part of the wedding because they were going to elope and her family is out there, her kids are out there, all this, right? And Jordan basically tells him like, no, I'm not, you know, willing to do it. And eventually, you know, ends up spending the weekend with her grandparents instead of going to the wedding. So the father ends up going there by himself. Eventually, Miss Tina moves to Texas where Jordan and her father live. Miss Tina ends up leaving her 3 children in Ohio with their father who has full custody of them. And they end up moving houses. Now, when they move houses, they end up moving like 40 minutes away from the performing arts school that Jordan was attending for dance. And so she, you know, was like obviously trying to plead her case and say like, I want to stay at the school. But when that didn't work, she was like, okay, at least can you let me go to prom as my like last hurrah with my friends? And, you know, after, you know, begging and pleading, they finally say no and tell her like, you can't go to this prom. I think what really bothered Jordan about the whole prom situation was that Miss Tina was trying to act like a fake advocate and being like, oh, I'll talk to your father, like we'll make sure you get to go as long as you don't wear a white dress because that's for your wedding day, like you can go to prom, right? And then after like trying to almost like play Jordan and be like, yeah, I'm on your side, she, you know, ultimately did not get her to prom. And so she just felt like maybe things aren't going to be that bad. So this began the pattern of things being like given to Jordan and then taken away at like a moment's notice, so not really too much explanation on why it was happening. At that time, Jordan was a part of a dance camp as well. When she got dropped off one day, her camp counselor was like, oh my God, Jordan, I love seeing your face. You always have such a happy expression on your face. And at that time she would say like, yeah, like I'm a very bubbly person, like, you know, I tend to just have like a resting happy face, right? Miss Tina ends up making a little snide comment saying like, yeah, she has no reason to be that happy, alluding to, you know, Jordan's hard childhood, losing her mom at such a young age. What Miss Tina didn't realize,
This woman is a bee. I can't. See, that's I don't have too many things to give my dad credit for, but he did for sure. He was very hesitant of including or like introducing stepmothers into my life when I was younger, because of that reason, because there's just a lot of horror stories when it comes to stepmothers and them like somehow being jealous of the kids of the husband. It's too much.
or maybe she did realize, was that she was starting to plant seeds inside Jordan's head that she was not somebody that deserved to be happy, that the things that she had gone through should have scarred her and turned her into a bitter, like, unhappy person. And she said that, you know, slowly but surely her happy resting face turned into a resting bee face. Jordan was really excited too because one of her friends from the camp actually lived in her new neighborhood, so she was just like, okay, cool. So she would start going on like walks around the neighborhood, she would start like hanging out with friends and stuff, and so she was starting to find some like normalcy, right? And one day she was out, and the rule in her house, as always, was be home before the streetlights come on, right? And so she's having fun, she comes home one day, and Miss Tina's just like yelling at her, she's like berating her, and Jordan's like, what are you talking about? She's like, how dare you go into somebody's house that we don't know? And Jordan's like, my dad has done business with her dad, like I've spent weekends at these people's houses, like we rotate, like they're very close-knit friends, right? So like I'm not walking into somebody's house that I don't know, like it's not even like that, you know? But Miss Tina didn't want to hear that. So once the stepmom went off on her about going into people's houses who she grew up like rotating sleepover weekends at, all this, she basically realized, okay, maybe my stepmom isn't as cool as I thought she was, and I was right the first time around when I thought there was something off about this woman. So in school year finally started, she ended up meeting these three girls, and she ends up becoming best of friends with them. They become her strongest support system through these next 2 years. And so, you know, that's all Jordan had on her mind, was like, let me get through these next 2 years, I'm gonna graduate, I'm gonna leave this house, and I'm never gonna look back, right? So homecoming comes around, and somebody asked her to homecoming, but she didn't really want to go with that boy, she wanted to go with her friends. And so she's asking her parents, like, can I go to homecoming with my friends? And they're not really, you know, trying to allow her. It wasn't until her friend ended up calling her parents and being like, hey, can Jordan please come? Like, I'll let her wear one of my dresses, like, just let her come, right? So her father ends up acquiescing. She goes to homecoming, she has a great time, she wears one of her friend's dresses, only for Miss Tina to get upset and be like, yeah, that's so embarrassing that you wore another girl's dress, like, you should have gotten a new dress, like, making this whole deal about nothing. Like Jordan said, girls share clothes.
You didn't even want to let her go. So I know you don't care that she wore someone else's dress. Shut up.
all the time. I have clothes in my closet right now from homegirls. Jordan started off this relationship calling this woman Tina. She apparently got super offended by that and was like, no, you can refer to me as Miss Tina, or you can call me mom. But Jordan didn't feel very authentic calling her mother. She was like, yes, I called Wendy.
Mom is crazy. Mom is crazy when you talk to her like that. Yeah, call me mom.
Mother, because she was a mother figure to me for over 10 years, right? And yes, I felt comfortable calling my sister's mom. But you, I don't know you. She even like tried to call her mom a few times, but it just felt so fake. She couldn't go through with it. And so she would tell her like, I can't even believe you call Wendy mom. Like, I do everything for you. That woman doesn't even want anything to do with you. She hates you. All these things about Wendy. And then Miss Tina would go as far as to tell Jordan, your mother, your biological mother, was an unfit mother. She didn't raise you well. How dare you? This woman was dying of cancer. She had 3 children on her full custody, and she was doing her absolute best. Jordan said it. Was she perfect? Probably not. But at the end of the day, she gave them everything that she could do. And had she been around, Jordan knows that none of this shit would ever happen to her. So now entering Miss Tina's children. She has an older daughter who's in college who barely ever came around. Then there was the middle child who was like close to age in Jordan, so she was the closest with the stepson. And then she had a toddler, right? And stepson basically told her like, watch her back. This woman likes to snoop around. She likes to listen to phone calls. He's the one that taught her how to acknowledge the conference light and be like, oh, somebody else is like listening into our phone call, and now it's become a 3-way. Like, you need to pay attention to that. Because Jordan would like have conversations with her friends, right? And then Miss Tina would drop little comments, and Jordan would be sitting there like, I didn't write that anywhere. I didn't say that anywhere where you could have heard me. Like, how do you know? Now she knows. Miss Tina was listening in on her conversations all these times. So now she was like, peeping game and seeing that anytime she got on the phone, indeed the conference light was on, and Miss Tina was listening. She said Miss Tina's kids did love her and they did have loyalty to her, but at the end of the day, that stepson definitely wanted to let Jordan know, watch your back. So, Miss Tina started doing weird things to Jordan when it came to like the kitchen and food, and she would yell at her and be like, come help me. And then when Jordan would come down and try to help her, she would get upset with her, like, you don't know the difference between cabbage and lettuce. And Jordan's telling her like, I don't know anything, just teach me. I'll do it if you teach me, right? Tina would just like go off and be like, you're wasting both of our times, and she's telling her like, you told me to come in here and help you, and I'm telling you I don't know how to cook, and now you're getting upset. Like, how does that make any sense? If she's not yelling at her about how to cook or whether she's cooking or not, she's yelling at her about how she does her dishes. It's just like a constant nitpicking of Jordan, right? And so it got to the point where Jordan was like, I'm just not gonna do anything. I'm not gonna wash the dishes. I'm not gonna eat the food that you cook. Nothing. So she started living off of ramen, rice and beans, things that she can warm up out of the pantry was all Jordan was gonna eat. Unless her father cooked, then she'll have something of that. But after
That's freaking crazy. Having to make whole separate meals in your own house just so you make sure you don't eat nothing from that lady. I mean, it's kind of smart though. Who knows what she would do to like her plate or something. She just sounds like she would be the type of person to mess with someone's food.
that she wasn't going to eat anything that Miss Tina made. Miss Tina was also obsessed with having like this picture perfect image, right? And so if people came over, then she would tell Jordan like, make sure you eat, like trying to keep up appearances, right? But God forbid Jordan added anything to the food, altered it in any way, Miss Tina would lose it. Jordan says a lot of this was able to happen because her father worked a lot. He was gone. A lot of time that Jordan spent was with Miss Tina. And so one day Miss Tina walked into her room and basically told her like, unless your father's around, don't talk to me, don't acknowledge me, don't speak to me. And so Jordan just kind of like sighed as, Miss Tina was walking out the door. Miss Tina turns around and she's like, what'd you say? And Jordan's like, nothing, I didn't say anything. She's like, yeah, that's what I thought. Like literally punking a baby, a child. Only time Miss Tina runs to Jordan's father and be like, oh my God, Jordan doesn't talk to me unless you're around. Like she's just so horrible. She doesn't acknowledge me. And then, the father comes at Jordan sideways and Jordan's looking at him like, I'm doing what she asked me to do. She told me not to talk to her unless you're around. And, the father's looking at her like, that's absurd. Like that's outrageous. That doesn't make any sense. And she's like, yeah, I know that doesn't make any sense. I'm telling you that. I'm telling you it doesn't make any sense. So like, why are you believing this woman,
That's another thing. Like, as a parent, sure, you could be skeptical in your head, but you should never say that out loud. You should never tell your kid, like, oh, that sounds ridiculous. There's no way she said that. Because what if she did say that? And now your kid knows that they can't trust you because you're going to believe the stepmother over her.
And so I think Miss Tina did a really good job of breaking down the relationship between Jordan and her father, making communications really strained. And, he just wasn't there to see a lot of it. And because he wasn't there to see a lot of it, it's just unbelievable to think a whole adult would be doing something like this to a child, right? But lo and behold, she completely tortured Jordan for so long. Because of just all this unrest that was happening in Jordan's house, she just started spending more time at her grandparents' house, spending time at her friend's house, basically trying to do anything not to be back home. It just got worse. Miss Tina started making fun of Jordan's weight, saying that she had a muffin top, telling her that her jeans weren't fitting because her thighs grew, telling her all these horrible things that you should not say to a child, like, especially one that is forming her image and forming her self-esteem. Like, you don't just berate a child like this. And so, Jordan, again, in efforts to not be home as much as possible, she joins cross country and she starts running. And she says, look, I'm not the type of person to run. I hate running, right? To the point that she lost so much weight that even her bus driver, who she has known, pulled her aside one day and was like, baby, are you okay? Is home okay? Like, tell me what's going on. She's like, oh no, I'm just exercising more. I'm just working out. But in reality, not only is she working out and exercising more, she's also eating only ramen and, Uncle Ben's and Chef Boyardee. You know what I'm saying? So obviously this child is being abused in multiple ways at this point. Also, Jordan felt like she was a good kid. She had okay grades. Maybe she didn't do the best in history, she said, but outside of that, she didn't cause too much issues. And at the end of the day, somehow always found herself grounded. She was like, I don't understand why I'm always grounded. Either my phone is taken away or something is going on, Miss Tina had been told, Jordan, I'm not doing your laundry anymore. Like, you need to figure out how to do that. So her dad was doing her laundry for her. But again, her dad works a lot. So Jordan was, asking him, like, please just teach me. Like, I'll, do my laundry myself. I guess one day she forgot to bring her laundry down. Miss Tina ended up going off again and being like, you're dirty, you're unhygienic, like, you're disgusting, and grounds her. She was on her way to go hang out with her cousin. And so she tells her, you can't go back upstairs. And then the next day she's like, I'm going to allow you again, that give and take situation, I'm going to allow you to go to your cousin's because your cousin doesn't deserve to be disciplined when you're the one that's irresponsible. And God forbid Jordan has like skirts with like some Uggs on or something like that, because all of a sudden she's promiscuous now. And God forbid she has a favorite piece of article of clothing or anything like that. Now Miss Tina has to take it, put it in a bag, and hide it somewhere. So when Jordan found a bag full of clothes that she thought she may have lent to friends or lost over the years, she actually just found it in a bag hiding in the office. And she's just like, so this woman's not like stealing my stuff. So one day Miss Tina picks up Jordan from school and she's taking her to a dentist appointment. Now Jordan didn't want to have bread all up in her teeth. She only ate the fruit that she had for lunch. And so Miss Tina ends up asking her like, hey, did you eat your sandwich today? And Jordan didn't want no problem. She said, yeah, I ate it. And so Miss Tina's like, well, show me. So at that point, Jordan's like, damn, I lied. I'm about to get my ass, chewed up. So at this point, she's very used to being yelled at. So when she takes out her lunchbox and opens it up and shows Miss Tina, and Miss Tina sees the sandwich, immediately she smacks her in the face. She smacks her in the face to the point that she knocks her head almost into the window. And Jordan is like baffled. Her jaw.
No, because I was already not with her, like, discipline. I don't believe in that. If you're a step parent and you came into the life of that child once they were already 10 plus years old, you don't get to discipline them. You're not their parent. Let alone put your hands on them. Oof.
On the ground. She's like, what the hell? She's looking at Miss Tina like, did you just smack me? And Miss Tina's looking at her like, take that look off your face, move your hand from your face, don't act like you're a victim, da-da-da. Just, she doesn't even know what she said at this point because she's just stunned. She's just looking at her like, you just put your hands on me. You know what I'm saying? So they pull her to the dentist, she hops out, she goes in there, and of course her dentist notices that she's not her bubbly self. She's like, what's going on? What's wrong? And she wishes that she said something at that point, but she didn't. And she, again, had been like taught to think like I'm gonna get in trouble if I say anything, right? So she doesn't say anything, she gets picked up, and that's the very first time Miss Tina ever put her hands on this child. She also didn't tell her father because she just didn't feel like her father would even believe her at this point. The majority of her family were actually a church-going family every Sunday, and Miss Tina would use that against her as well. She told her that she's a deceitful person, that she is going to go to hell, all these things, right? And she really had Jordan questioning like her worthiness, her ability to be happy even, And so she told her one day like, yo, it's really disappointing that like when the pastor asked people to come down to be prayed for forgiveness, you don't go down there. Jordan ends up going down there one day and being like, I need to ask for forgiveness. Like obviously like Miss Tina's right, everything that I'm doing is my fault. There's something that I'm doing that's making all this happen to me. So like let me go and ask God for forgiveness, and maybe all this stuff will stop. So Miss Tina would tell her the things that are happening to you is because you have an evil spirit. So Jordan's family members, I think it was her cousin and her older sister, would come down and take her out to like, the movies. They would take her out to dinner, just like to treat their little baby sister, baby cousin. And Miss Tina of course had something to say about that. She'd be like, oh, you're selfish. Like you don't do that to your own sisters. Like she's like, well, what money? You guys don't give me allowances. Like what am I supposed to do? Miss Tina would say things like, oh, you don't support your sister in her dance. And Jordan would tell her like, that's not my responsibility to know her schedule. Like my dad just tells me when the performances are, and then we just go and support her. Like it's not that big of a deal kind of thing. So when Jordan ended up having her own hip hop style kind of performance, Miss Tina was like, your performance was very distasteful and trashy and all these other things. Things hit the fan when one day Jordan was out with her friends at the movies. She ended up not responding to her father's call. She says, yes, I was wrong. I should have answered back. She eventually gets home, and the minute she gets home, before she can even put the key in the door, Miss Tina ends up yanking the door open. She pulls her in, slams her against the wall, and she just starts going in on her. And she's just like, what's wrong with you? She tries to push her away. She runs upstairs. She switches her shoes, puts some sneakers on, put a hoodie on, and then tries to grab the phone to call 911. Miss Tina is at her. She's at her neck. She's grabbing at her. She's pulling her hair. She's scratching her. So at this point, Jordan's like, I'm not going to make it out the front door. I can make it out the garage. She tries to swing her arm around to hit the garage door. Miss Tina closes the door on her arm. And so at this point, she's pushing her off with the other arm. She finally gets her other arm free, and she pushes, Miss Tina off. She runs into the office, and at this point, she's looking at her like, what is wrong with you? Like, what is wrong with you? Stop. And Miss Tina's like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? I'm assuming like she's just like absolutely irate, right? And so Jordan's just looking at her like why are you acting like this, right? Eventually the father comes home, he breaks up everything, and of course, who gets in trouble? Jordan does. It's surprising to me at this point that the father never thought to sit Tina down and be like, what exactly is happening? Why is Jordan lashing out so much? Why is there always some type of situation that I have to come over to, right? He just off bat took Miss Tina aside and just assumed Jordan was in the wrong. Her father sends Jordan to her room. She goes up there crying. She at this point had saved up all summer with her little sister by not buying lunches, and got her like a little prepaid phone with some minutes on it. So she's calling her friends, asking for advice, asking for support. They basically tell her the minute you can leave the house and come over, just come over, right? So the next day she wakes up, she leaves, and her father basically tells her like, when I'm not home, don't be home. Just like let's separate y'all two. So she leaves. So she ends up going to a friend's house after the fight, and
when I'm not home, don't be home. Where is a child supposed to go besides their own home? I freaking hate this man. I think I hate him more than I hate her, because she's just doing what he's allowing her to do.
she's like combing her hair out, she's crying, clumps of her hair are coming out because Miss Tina was pulling at it, and her friend's mom ends up overhearing it. She's like, oh no baby, we cannot have this happen ever again. So she basically decides to start feeding Jordan, making sure that she either goes home with some food or eats at that house before she goes home, and telling her like, I need to see you every day to make sure you're okay. Her friend's mom even offers Jordan a place to stay for the rest of the year. She's like, you can stay with us if you want to. And at this point she's like, I need to, start forming my plan to what I'm going to do when I leave this house, right? So she's at her senior year, she starts applying for schools, and she's hoping to get into this like 5-year bachelor/master's program, and her parents don't even believe it's real. Like her stepmom and her dad are like, that's not a real thing. She's like, yeah, it wasn't at the school fair, it wasn't at the school tour where they explained this to us, like it's very much real. You could have done your own research, looked it up, and seen that it was real. It was a 5-year accounting school at SFA, and they were like, yeah, that's not a real thing. Her older cousin ends up intervening. This is when Jordan finds out that none of the paperwork that she needed turned in for school was ever turned in. The school basically had no knowledge of her ever applying, nothing of the sort. And so while everybody else was finding out like what colleges they got accepted to and things like that, Jordan had nothing in the mail. And so she basically ends up talking to her cousin and coming up with a plan that when she graduates, she's going to move in with her older cousin. The day that Jordan graduated from high school, she moved out of her father's house. As she's walking away, her stepmom's going to walk up to her and be like, give me the key. And Jordan's like, key to what? And she's like, give me the key to the house. And Jordan's like, I don't have your key to your house. I don't know what you're talking about. She ends up going to her friend's house, getting the key, giving it back to Miss Tina, and she never looked back. She never spoke to that woman ever again, and she has a very, very thin surface level relationship with her father. She ended up living with her cousin. She tried to go to community college for a year afterwards, but she ended up needing some paperwork that had to do with like some type of immunity shots, but she wasn't able to get the information in on time, and she ended up not continuing on with community college. She ended up getting into, the workforce and just building up her career that way. She never ended up going to college, which honestly broke my heart, because I feel like had this woman never entered her life, who knows where she would have been, right? She seemed like a very bright young lady. The other side of the family never knew what was really going on. When they did finally find out, they were outraged, they were saddened, they wish they would have known so they could have intervened and done something for her. Ultimately, she ended up just working and moving out of her cousin's place and getting her own place and just, living life like that. She ended up not having the closest relationship with her grandparents moving forward either, because when she finally told her grandmother everything that was going on, all her grandmother really had to say was, well, what did you do? Well, what was your part in all of this? Instead of accepting her and being like, maybe this woman is off, there's something that needed to be done, she just kept trying to pacify the situation. And so that ended up causing a rift in their, relationship. Her grandmother did end up passing away. And now that her grandfather is living with Miss Tina and the father, I think he finally got to see the side of Miss Tina that only, Jordan had really experienced. Her grandfather said something to her to the effects of, I don't care what's going on between you and that woman, you need to come and visit me though. Jordan was able to get the contact information of Wendy after high school, and they did have about an hour or two conversation on the phone. It did not, matriculate to kind of like a steady relationship. They just kind of like caught up for a little bit and then moved on with their lives. They both do wish each other love and happiness, but their relationship was forever changed. On Wendy's side, she was being told that Jordan didn't want to see her, she hated her, and vice versa, Jordan was being told the same thing as well. But come to find out, once they, was exchanging notes years later, neither of them said these things, but too much damage had been done. She does still have a close relationship with her sister's mother. That is one mother figure that she did not lose through all of this. She said, her and her boyfriend are in a good place too, looking forward towards marriage and children, and she's saying like, even though I have a surface level relationship with my father now, I know that's going to change once I, get to these milestones. I'm not going to let him walk me down the aisle. I'm not going to, have him around my children. I'm definitely not going to have Miss Tina around my children. But I think after sharing the story and then all of us kind of like pouring into her and being like, yo, your father was very much complicit. She is now looking at the relationship that she has with her father and being like, I need to reevaluate this. I think I did let him off with too much grace, which I'm not mad at. That's your father. You have every right to forgive him if you want to. Acknowledging the hurt that he caused you, also him allowing your relationship to get diminished so much, I think that is something that you should, examine. So I'm really glad that TikTok was able to like guide you towards that. Outside of that though, Jordan, I'm sending you so much love. I'm sorry that you had to go through this at such a young age. No adult should be preying on a child like that. That is an insecure, insufficient woman. Insufficient. Because she within herself was not happy, all she could do was tear the people around her, and unfortunately the only person around her was you, and you did not deserve that for that to happen to her. Whatever demons she was fighting, whatever evil spirits were within her, was her business. She had no right to spew that on you. So I'm so sorry that happened to you. The fact that you said that you still have a kind and loving heart regardless of what this woman did to you, I love that. Because a lot of people feel like, oh, I've been through shitty things, I get to be a shitty person now. And you said, no, I'm still gonna be kind. I'm still gonna be, a remorseful, forgiving person. That makes you the winner. As always, send Jordan some love. You guys tag me in this about.
Yeah, no, she definitely let her dad off way too easy. She can forgive him because forgiveness is about you, but she doesn't have to talk to him. She doesn't have to have any type of relationship with him. He's still with that woman after she smacked her. I mean, mind you, he may or may not have known that, but it doesn't matter. She smacked her. She talked to her crazy. She pushed her nose into like disciplining a child that's not hers. Like, there's no way, even with little even if he wasn't in the home a lot, there's no way that you wouldn't have noticed that your wife freaking hates your kid. Like, there's just no way. But let me know what you think about those two stories in the comments. Bye.